I got electrocuted. And I don't know if you've ever been down this road with electricity, but it's a violent force, man. It's like Poseidon just kind of just finger banged your butt. That's how I felt. I'm going to tell you guys what happened. I hadn't been electrocuted in a long time. And you forget what it's like. You forget the power of it. Well, first I'll tell you about the first time I got electrocuted. I was young. I was a boy, and I was a young boy, and I grew up near a fairground, and a fairground is a place where the fair comes, and they have animals there when the fair isn't there, and people show animals and stuff like that, 4-H people, and it was a big field, and once a year, the fair would come, and it was not far from our home where we lived at. So me and some of the other boys from the neighborhood, my friend Clark, would go over there, and before the fair would open up for the public, they had a day where they would let us ride the rides, and they charged us maybe a quarter, I think, or 50 cents, and to get in, and you could ride as much as you want as the rides were being put up and functioning. And in hindsight, I think they were kind of just experimenting with us, but we didn't see that. We just saw it as a deal, because to get a regular wristband for the big fair day, it was about $8. And we didn't usually have that money, so we would go the day prior, and we'd get out there. And they had a lot of, miscreants and ne'er-do-wells out there, and, men that were running from the law, and women that kind of looked like lesbians, but that probably weren't lesbians, non-practicing lesbians maybe. And we'd get on the rides. And I got on a ride, and my buddy Clark was this kind of odd boy. He'd had some issues. He hated sound. He hated sounds. He hated all just sounds, man. So he would often, wear something extra on his head to kind of keep the sound out of him. He just, I don't know why he was like that. Everybody's got their thing, and he just wasn't keen with sounds, and he was more, you whispered around him. He was just he was gentle when it came to the airwaves. And so he'd often have an extra hat on, or, some couple of muffs on his ears, or he'd have his head kind of wrapped up in something, wrap an extra cloth or something around his head to keep things quiet around him. But we'd get onto the rides, and it was pretty good, some of them, it was the first run. Some of the cages would have, birds would have nested in some of the different pivots and joints of the rides, like the zipper and the tilt-a-whirl, the gravitron. I remember the gravitron as well. I'll tell you a story about that in a second. But so I was getting off of something. I think it might have been the tilt-a-whirl, and it was one of those rides where when you get off the back, you can hear a generator kind of really just rumbling. You can hear a generator really rumbling, and I'm getting off, and I was holding onto the rail, and then I held another rail, and at that point I completed some type of a circuit, some sort of loose energy that wasn't being used by the ride, and it started using me. And I remember just like my neck got real straight, and everything I knew just felt alert. And I remember this man was like a tall black man, and everybody was tall to me because I was a child, but he could have been a basic heighted black man. He was like, "You got to get off the ride, boy." And I was like, "I can't let go," and he thought that I was taking issue with him, or that I was, just being kind of just a little cunt, And so he put his foot on my back and basically just kicked me off the ride. Not kicked me, pushed me with his foot. And there is a difference. You know, some people are always saying they get kicked, but sometimes you just get pushed with somebody's foot. And thank God he did, dude, because it was kind of rude of him, but thank God he did, because I don't think that I would have survived. But I hadn't been electrocuted since then, since we'd been out there, you know, experimenting on these rides. The Gravitron, I remember they had a man in there who looked like Slash from Guns N' Roses. And that was the one where you went in and you laid against the wall, and then it spun, you know, like you were in the dryer, and it spun, and the board you were leaning against would start to levitate against the wall. You know, like you were really just on the last cycle of a load of laundry. And at that point, you couldn't move hardly. You couldn't move your neck or anything. You just had to really look just straight forward. And they had a DJ in the middle, a rock and roll man. And he'd be in there playing rock and roll. And I remember this guy had a bit of the pervert in him. And he would kind of show his wiener while we were spinning. And it was weird because I remember we never discussed it, because you were always, or I personally felt like I was always unsure if I was just spinning so fast that I was like seeing wieners or something, that I was seeing, adult body pieces. But now as I've gotten older, I know what happened, and that man was showing out. And that wasn't right of him to do that. I think he was just being like a party guy, but that was the Gravitron, because you couldn't move. You couldn't look and see if everybody else was seeing the same thing. So you didn't know if everybody saw it, and people, I guess, were maybe scared to talk about it. And then Clark, you didn't discuss things with him that much because he liked to be silent. He liked to just be kind of by himself. But anyhow, that was the first time I got electrocuted when I was young. And then until now,